Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. Today, we're going to continue our tour of major late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s, and late 90s albums. That kind of...
keep up with that.
Hey, you know what? It makes sense. That were big releases that some people may not have heard before. And definitely, from my perspective, it was cool. The 90s were actually a period of time that I just kind of skipped over. I knew a lot of bands from like the 70s and into the 80s, but then I didn't know a lot about the 90s because in the 90s I was listening to pop because I was like, 9, 10.
Can't fault you for that.
Yeah, but then so it's really good to get back to some of these underground, more alternative releases. Today, you know how we've always said that this sounds just exactly like Sunny Day Real Estate? We get to actually say that this does sound like Sunny Day Real Estate because that's what we're reviewing. Sunny Day Real Estate's third album came out in 1998, How It Feels to Be Something On. Tom, do you like this album?
I love this album.
Oh,
and Sunny Day Real Estate was actually a band I kind of grew up with, oddly enough, simply because their song 8 was on the Batman Forever soundtrack.
Your favorite movie?
Oh, God. Don't get that rumor started. That's terrible.
He watched it last night.
But I was
watching him watch it.
That's creepy as hell. When I was like 7 years old, my brother and I had that on cassette, and we really liked the song 8, so we decided to check out Sunny Day Real Estate and ended up really liking them. But what's funny is that while they're a band that I grew up with, they're also a band I never really even fully appreciated or attached to until probably the last couple of years. And they have influenced so much other music that I like, and they're so good on their own that they're just a band I feel like everyone should know about.
Yeah.
As Jake mentioned, we have an inside joke that whenever we're checking something out, we're like, oh, this sounds like Sunny Day Real Estate, because it just seems like every single rock band since Sunny Day Real Estate has been influenced by Sunny Day Real Estate.
Right.
From Jimmy Eat World to a lot of the post-hardcore bands like Glassjaw, Thursday, Brand New.
The Beatles? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. But I mean, actually, I think the funniest moment for me is when I was looking up Baroness on AllMusic, and I looked at their influences, and there were only 3 bands listed, and one of them was Sunny Day Real Estate.
Right.
And I just thought that was so funny, because I wouldn't have even guessed that, judging just off of listening to Baroness's music. But, I mean, the reach of this band is just so phenomenal.
Yeah.
They started with an album called Diary that I actually know a lot of people who consider that to be their best album. Yeah. It's definitely...
It's raw.
Yeah, very raw. And Jeremy, the vocalist, his vocals on that album were even more drony and whiny than this one. I mean, it's almost like unintelligible, his lyrics at times, with just that raw emo scream that'll come in the choruses. These guys were a huge front runner in the emo scene, which kind of sucks because I feel like that only kind of went in a bad direction. But these guys, as the start of it, were incredible.
How do you say Jeremy's last name?
Damn it, Jake! I didn't say it for a reason.
That's why I wanted to call you.
Just called me out on it.
Go ahead.
I don't know how to pronounce it, but I think that How It Feels to Be Something On is the highlight of their discography. As their third album, it's that perfect balance of being polished but not being overproduced. There's so much variety in these tracks, and every single song is good.
Yeah, I had listened to this album a handful of times because you were really into it last summer.
And I was like forcing it.
And I put it on and was like, I really like it. Now, when you start to, I mean, for me, and Tom, tell me if you feel the same way, when I put my reviewing lens on and I start to listen to the album in context of we're going to put it on camera for you guys, I listen to an album differently. I get way into the details, really pick apart everything that the band's doing on each individual track and how it sums up as a whole album listen. And let me tell you something, the more that I listen to How It Feels to Be Something On, the more I want to keep listening to it. This has to be one of the best crafted albums of all time. Not only is the instrumentation, lyrics, vocals, all just, phenomenally executed, but the songwriting is just bar none. Some of the best alternative progressive rock songwriting of all time. And I think Tom, this is something that I think I pointed out to you. Like you listen to tracks like 100 Million, you can tell these guys were clearly strongly influenced by Yes. And Yes, if you're familiar with the band Yes, very high-pitched vocals. Sunny Day Real Estate has a very high-pitched vocalist in Jeremy, whatever his last name is, and also very progressive blended song writing, and that's exactly what Sunny Day Real Real Estate is doing here. This album is polished, yet not super polished. As Tom said, it flows very nicely. It rocks when it needs to rock. It's sentimental when it needs to be sentimental, and yet it never follows a formula. I find that it's so hard to pick tracks on this album because I literally love every single track on this album. One of the key moments to me is on track 8, guitar and video games, where it's just that image where he says, we're gonna play guitar and video games, talking about kind of harkening back to his youth and hanging out with friends and stuff. That's something that I can really relate to. Hanging out with you when we were like 13.
And what did we do?
Old.
We played guitar and video games.
Yeah. So it just it's like there's a lot of sentimentality behind the lyrics, and as I've gotten into it more and listened to the lyrics, I mean, yes, this has gotten termed. I think emo just has a bad connotation to it.
It
now.
does. Yeah.
And while a lot of these songs are evocative and emotional, I wouldn't call it the same as like the emo of the post-hardcore scene of the early 2000s.
Well, because Jeremy's not just like pouring out his boyhood emotions to you. He's making it a little more poised, and he's delivering a message that has so much more depth than that.
Right.
And also it's a message that he doesn't really repeat. I think every song seems to have a very different feel to it and a different message.
Right.
And I can really get behind that. I mean, I feel like I could sit and say good things about this album all damn day. Probably one of the main reasons that we're reviewing it is just so that other people can get exposed to it. I really hope that you go seek this album out.
I cannot come up with one criticism.
No, me neither.
I can't. And there's very few albums out there that I can't come up with a criticism for.
Yeah.
And like Zeppelin 4, 9 Inch Nails, The Downward Spiral, Any More, Lost in the Trees, A Church That Fits. It's like those caliber of albums to me. This is right up there with that because everything is so implemented to perfection that I can't get over it.
And it's just addictive.
Oh, it absolutely is.
I remember I was hooked on this album like fall of last year. I'd kind of rediscovered it. And I kind of slowly tried to get you to listen to it. And I remember that moment a couple weeks ago when it just clicked with you and you were like, this is all I want to listen to.
It's all I want to listen to. Yep, that's absolutely right. And as Tom mentioned earlier in the review, it has influenced so many artists since then. And really, we're going to review one that directly references this album in many ways. We're going to review Brand New's The Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me, which is an emo album in that genre. It's just one of the better ones, but it's playing off of a lot of the things that Sunny Day Real Estate did and how it feels to be something on. This is a fantastic album. I'm giving it a 100.
I'm giving it 100.
What do you guys think? Are you familiar with Sunny Day Real Estate? They're not really a very well-known band. I mean, they have they have some notoriety, but I don't hear people going, "Oh yeah, Sunny Day Real Estate." I never hear Sunny Day Real Estate tracks played on our alternative college music station here.
No, yeah, and they really should be.
Yeah.
I mean, because a lot of what people are into comes back to these guys. So as I've said, I'll say it again. Please check this album out. Do yourself a favor. If you like any of the kind of music that we've been mentioning and referencing that kind of comes back to this, listen to this. Listen to Diary and just really dive into this band stuff because they are such an experience.
When you do, let us know what you think at www.velocitiesandmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. As always, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. This one wasn't really a request. Have we had many requests for Sunny Day?
We actually have had some.
No kidding. Well, that's probably because we talk about them all the time. And now you know why, for good reason. Let us know what you guys thought and give us more requests and, just join in a conversation with us about music. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and the like. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Moving Music Critique Forward.